This is Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. I'm so glad you're with us. On this episode, we're going to be speaking with 3 elected officials from Long Beach. We'll be speaking with 2 members of the Long Beach City Council, Robert Garcia and Gerri Schipske, and then we'll be speaking with a member of the Board of Trustees of the Long Beach Community College District. His name is Jeff Kellogg, but first we start with Robert Garcia. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Sure.
And I want to speak with you about a very controversial issue, not just in Long Beach, but statewide, and that deals with medical marijuana. Now, recently, the Long Beach City Council voted on to extend an ordinance that would have given a 6-month reprieve to 18 collectives. It's a lot of language, but essentially, should we allow collectives to continue? What happened?
So what happened was, I think a lot of us on the council are aware of what's going on really from a statewide level and a federal level with medical marijuana. You have the Fed saying it's an illegal drug, marijuana is not accepted. You have the state, which passed the Compassionate Use Act, which is saying you can cultivate it in small groups in a collective kind of nonprofit way. So in Long Beach, we wrestled with this idea of how do we allow these collectives, allowed by the state of California, to exist. So we opened up this process. We had 18 that we kind of approved as legal collectives, kind of went after and tried to shut down the negative ones. But since then, we've gotten really mixed results, not just on the policy end, but really from the court's end.
That would be an understatement.
Right.
I mean, there have been so many conflicting decisions on the use of medical marijuana, and really not so much the use, but the sale of, the commerce side of it. In Long Beach, it was held illegal. In Los Angeles a few weeks ago, it was held legal. In Riverside, they said that you could pass an ordinance in terms of land use to prevent them. And we know the California Supreme Court is going to hear, I guess, the consolidated cases.
Right, and that's really key because at the end of the day, we've had these different court decisions up and down the state, which really have different outcomes, right? It's legal here, it's not legal here, you can tax it here, you can't tax it there. And the state will hopefully, once and for all, give us a very clear kind of mandate. We expect maybe even December or January.
But what's interesting is in February, the Long Beach City Council voted 8-1 to allow these 18 collectives to continue to operate. But just a few weeks ago, that same exact council voted 5-4 to end that exemption.
Correct.
And you were in the
minority.
Minority.
I was in the minority. So essentially, you're right. I mean, we had these 18 collectives that were given this kind of 6-month extension, and that was partly so that they knew that, you know what, we have these extra 6 months. If we invested money, we can maybe make back some of the money they had invested. A lot of these places, put in a lot of security and expanded and construction. But also, that gave us an opportunity to do a review at 6 months. Us in the minority felt that these 18 collectives had in good faith operated, and that we should most importantly wait for the court case to really give us a clear review.
So what's going to happen? Do they have to shut down in the next few weeks?
Well, I mean, according to the council, the council essentially instituted a ban. So essentially these collectives, by law, would have to shut down, at least at Long Beach municipal law, would have to close immediately. And so that Long Beach would essentially have a blanket ban. Now, there are those of us, including myself, that believe, though, that the law isn't clear. I mean,
right.
The recent case basically said that you can't ban collectives under the LA and under the Compassionate Use Act. And so I think I'm really looking forward for clarity from the state Supreme Court.
Well, do you expect these 18 collectives to take it, or do you expect them to file action or simply just ignore the ordinance?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think when a law is passed, even if you're on the losing side, which I was, you always respect the law.
But not so much you.
No, I understand.
But what are the collectives?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's going to really be up to them. And I think that our police will be out there enforcing the law as is. I didn't agree with the law that moved forward, but it is what it is. At the end of the day.
But here's where. So when you say the police, well, I mean, which police? I mean, the Long Beach police presumably would comply with city law,
right.
But what if the sheriff comes in? Couldn't the collectives call the Los Angeles County Sheriff and say, you're an arm of the state says I can keep this open, get these Long Beach officers out of my property?
Well, I mean, the sheriff very rarely, if ever, comes into Long Beach, and so I don't know if that would be an issue directly, but I think that our business licensing, our Long Beach Police Department, Health Department, all these departments are going to be involved with, and have been involved with the collectives as they've been around.
What about what Los Angeles did a couple of years ago? I think Oakland did the same, where they went to their voters and or their city councils, and what was approved was a tax. And so Los Angeles, for example, has raised almost $2.5 million on a tax related to these collectives. I mean, you guys have a budget deficit, sir. Sure. Get some money out of these collectives.
I would support a tax. I mean, let me tell you what I would support. What I think needs to happen is medicinal cannabis should be sold in a pharmacy. That's where it should be, and it should be taxed.
Now, prescriptions aren't taxed.
But I think I think the special case could be made per se. And ideally, I think you'd have a situation where it'd be sold in pharmacies. There'd be some type of special system set up, and it would get taxed.
Is alcohol taxed? I believe alcohol there's a sales tax on alcohol, but alcohol isn't so much medicinal.
Right. So we do need clarification on that, obviously.
That being said, I mean, you and I both know people with those medical marijuana cards for anxiety, depression. Sure. I mean, come on.
Absolutely.
I mean, it just seems.
So here's the reality. I mean, do you throw the baby out with the bathwater?
Right.
There are absolutely people that are abusing the medical marijuana card system. No question about it. It's being abused. There are also collectives that are abusing their nonprofit status that are making tons of money that they shouldn't be making off of patients and other users. But then there's also others. There's others that have HIV and AIDS, that have cancer, that can't keep food down, that actually need medical marijuana for their ailments. And there are those collectives that are actually out there doing a good job and doing things the right way.
I want to talk to you about another issue, and that deals with the breakwater.
Sure.
Can you give us a little history on the Long Beach breakwater?
Well, the breakwater is actually an issue I'm very passionate about. I mean, I think we all know back decades ago in the 1940s, the breakwater, which is essentially a federal property, and it's actually federal project that wanted to really create a safe haven for the Navy. So when Long Beach used to not have this breakwater off its shores, Navy comes in, they built this, these walls, essentially these sea walls, and what it did is it created a great opportunity for the Navy to have kind of calm waters within our shore. But of course, what it also did was it changed wave activity and the way water circulated on our shore. And so now what we have in the city of Long Beach is we have the greatest portion of beach in the entire state of California that is essentially unused.
Because there are no waves.
Because the wave activity is so low. And while we do have some really great sailing that happens and other activities, the breakwater issue is extremely important.
So what are you looking to do?
So what I support is what's been happening, and I support moving it forward. We did a feasibility study about 2 years ago on the breakwater to see whether we should even move forward. Should we move forward on working with the Army Corps of Engineers
to remove the breakwater?
Well, I think reconfiguration is probably something that's more realistic. The feasibility study said move forward, and now we're at the point where the City Council has actually funded half of what's called a reconnaissance study, which will be a major study done through Congress and the Army Corps of Engineers that will look at if it's even possible and what the impacts would be on the reconfiguration. We think that there's a way that the breakwater can be reconfigured, that all the homes in the peninsula and on the east side would not be affected. Essentially, you keep that portion of the seawalls as is, but you reconfigure maybe small portions of some of the seawalls east of that area. I'm sorry, on the west side, west. So towards kind of Alamitos Beach, towards downtown. And you would have more wave activity, you'd have cleaner water, you'd return kind of habitats the way they were naturally.
There's a lot of move toward revitalizing waterways, the Los Angeles River, which actually empties into Long Beach, now the breakwater. How are you feeling about this? Do you think this really will happen?
I do. I mean, I think with enough vision and dedication, I think it will. I think we've got to first and foremost protect the homes. I mean, if we find out through the study that there's going to have damage on homes, forget it. It's done. But if the study comes back and says, you can actually protect the homes, maybe even protect them more by building out some additional jetties or other types of mitigation structures, but also create this incredible beach. I think that's a win-win.
So what's the timeline?
Well, right now we're in the process. We're in that reconnaissance study phase. We just heard from the Army Corps just a week ago that they're looking at ways of looking at the scope and tweaking it so that we're able to move forward quickly. We hope that by the end of the year we'll have a clear vision of where we're going next. But I think we'll start the study hopefully within the next year or so.
Okay. His name is Robert Garcia, member of the Long Beach City Council. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Gerri Schipske. She was actually in the majority on the vote to ban medical marijuana clinics. We'll hear what she says. Robert, thanks for joining us. We thank you for joining us. We'll be right back on California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Gerri Schipske, she's a member of the Long Beach City Council. And yet again, the issue of medical marijuana is back in the news in Long Beach. Now, recently, the Long Beach City Council voted 5-4 against creating an ordinance that would have extended a 6-month reprieve on 18 medical marijuana collectives. It's complicated, but essentially, it's put a ban in place.
Well, we had to because
you were one of the 5.
I was one of the 5 because our city attorney has, I think, rightfully indicated that we're under the direction of a court ruling. There are other court rulings. The PAC case specifically told Long Beach, you cannot regulate medical marijuana because the federal government preempts, and the federal government says that marijuana is illegal. Therefore, we have no opportunity to regulate or to allow. So until that ruling gets overturned, we really, I don't think, had much of a legal opportunity.
But what's interesting is like you said, it's but one ruling, and there have been other rulings which have said the exact opposite.
Right.
I mean, recently there was a ruling out of Los Angeles which said that cities cannot create outright bans. Yet there was a ruling in Riverside a few months back that said cities can enforce land use ordinances to preclude the creation of medical marijuana collectives. It is a mishmash.
It is, and that's why what needs to happen for Long Beach is we need to get the ruling, it is being appealed, we need to see what the ruling is. But the problem is in the interim, we have no way to regulate what's out there, and to allow 18, 5, 4, whatever, it's inequitable actually for anyone else that wants to operate, because we've said 18. Well, the court's telling us we had no basis to do that.
But what's so interesting is you are a nurse, nurse practitioner,
right?
Yeah, and so you're an expert in medicine, one could argue, and so I really turn to you to get a sense of what you think about the practice of medical marijuana.
Well, medical marijuana, the jury's still out about its efficacy. However, I think it's very clear that for some people it's necessary for pain. It does take away the pressure for glaucoma, but there are also actually other alternatives. There's Marinol, which is a pharmaceutically and a liquid as well. The difficulty is that the Compassionate Use Act was set up not to make this into a profit-making industry, and that's the bigger issue, is that you had to have marijuana provided by your primary caregiver. Someone who operates a collective with 2,000 to 3,000 people or 100 people isn't a primary caregiver, because the law says they must have provided housing and food or something else for you before they provided your marijuana.
You're also a lawyer, so you could give us your legal opinion. And that being said, we know a case, but they're going to consolidate cases going to the California Supreme Court.
That's currently pending.
And that's what you're waiting for.
We're waiting on that because I think for the sake of everyone, for the sake of the city, for the sake of those who utilize medical marijuana, we need clarification. Long Beach is in the midst of a quagmire over this, but I do think I have the obligation to listen to what our city attorney says. And he has told us we have to follow the PAC case.
Here's what's interesting. In 2010, voters in Los Angeles approved a measure that taxed the revenue of clinics, and since April 2011, that city has collected $2.4 million. Wouldn't it be nice for Long Beach to have similar revenue?
No, I don't think we should derive revenue on medical marijuana, because here's the case, and actually I voted against putting that on our ballot. Because here's the kick. If it's really medicine, we don't tax medicine in California.
We don't tax prescriptions, is that right?
We don't tax any kind of medicine. So I want to be consistent. If it truly is medicine, then you don't tax it. If it's recreational use, that's a whole other ball game, and that opens up the questions about how well that's going to be regulated. And that's not what people are supportive of. They're supportive of medical marijuana.
The tricky part is, regardless of what the California Supreme Court says, like you mentioned, the federal government takes its position, and that being, and there's been alternating positions between the Bush administration, within the Obama administration. I mean, it still is a Schedule I drug.
Absolutely.
Is it time to look at that issue, whether it should be Schedule I?
I think so, but you won't have it under this Congress. I mean, there still is, and this is where I'm conflicted, there is still this dichotomy about, the war on drugs and these are terrible things. The fact remains is that there are some uses for this particular drug, and I think we need to look at it in that light and figure out how best we can make certain that those that need it and really it's efficient for them, then let's figure out how to do it.
Is prohibition failing? It failed with alcohol.
Oh, I think, the whole drug campaign in some ways has failed because it's targeted the wrong people. We haven't targeted the people that actually get the profit on this. We've targeted the user. We've targeted the person that really is the least able to defend themselves legally. So I think it does need to be looked at. Is it going to happen right now? No, not in this kind of climate. And I just have to stick to the local level and focus on what I hear from our city attorney, and I don't want to go against his legal advice.
To say you stick to the local level is an understatement because you are truly a historian of the city of Long Beach. I so enjoy having you on because we get to speak about, this is your second or third book?
Third book.
Is this three?
This is three.
This is the third one.
This is the third one.
This is the third one. It's called Images of America, Early Long Beach.
Right.
I mean,
and here's a funny part here.
Please.
Talk about prohibition. Prohibition is what made the city of Long Beach.
Go.
I have it in my book that people talked about that the reason they wanted to come to Long Beach is that it was a morally clean city, and that there's even there's articles nationwide that talks about how buttermilk and grape juice made Long Beach successful because they kept this city dry. Now, it also caused their disincorporation. They disincorporated the city because some people thought it'd be a way to get alcohol into the saloons and into the hotels. Then the county took over our assets and they turned around and said, whoops, this was a mistake. They reincorporated and they changed the prohibition law so that you had to have a doctor's letter.
Sounds familiar. History repeats itself.
For alcohol in Long Beach. And it would be served at hotels that had less than 15 rooms. So the Long Beach has been grappling with this. And the woman who was the vice president of the Women's Temperance Union from Long Beach ran for vice president of the United States from Long Beach. No, I'm kidding.
What was her name? What happened? What ticket?
It was the temperance ticket. And Long Beach was a combination of very Iowa people, Methodists, the influence of the Methodists who came here. We had large assemblies here. We gave them land so that they could have their assembly meetings here. They had their summer camps here. They had the Chautauquas, which was the assembly of teaching people, which is a nationwide movement. And it brought a lot of very conservative, very Midwestern people to Long Beach, and it stayed here. And William Wilmore, who thought of Long Beach to begin with when it was called Wilmore City, he was pro-temperance.
What I learned is that there were so many people here from Iowa that the Des Moines Register sent out a reporter to figure out what's going on. Why are all our residents moving to Long Beach?
Well, in fact, when I did the book, there's a wonderful site called newspaperarchives.com that a reporter told me about.
Right.
And I found most of my material in Iowa newspapers about Long Beach or Northern California newspapers about Long Beach because Long Beach was a place you came, it was a resort, the weather was wonderful.
Why Long Beach? Why
the weather was wonderful. People had lived in crowded quarters in the East Coast particularly. The railroads had just come across to the United States and they had rail fares wars where they offered $1 to come across, a couple hundred to go home, but 100 to come here.
Really?
And the railroads had a lot of land the government gave them, so they were selling land out here in California, in Long Beach, very cheaply.
But why not Los Angeles or San Diego?
It was happening. It's interesting. It was happening in Los Angeles, San Diego, and in Long Beach. Mm-hmm. And again, it was where the railroads were concentrated. We also had a lot of Civil War veterans who escaped the South or the North, literally after the war, and came out here and did orange grove farming, who discovered water. Bhutan Lake, which is in Lakewood Country Club, Bhutan was a general under
Gerri,
Grant.
You're a mother, a grandmother, a councilwoman, a nurse practitioner, a lawyer, a professor, an author. Why are you doing this? I mean, I love it, but
it's fun.
In your free time?
It's fun. I segmented my time on that, and they just asked me to write another book, and I said I kind of need a break
on
right
what?
now. The Pike. There's a real interest nationally in old-time amusement parks, and that was the other thing that drew people to Long Beach was the Pike.
Her name is Gerri Schipske. As I said, mother, grandmother, nurse practitioner, lawyer, professor, city councilman, and author. I'm exhausted too. I'm Brad Pomerance. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Jeff Kellogg. He is a member of the Board of Trustees on the Long Beach Community College District. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you for joining us. Our guest, Jeff Kellogg, he is a member of the Board of Trustees of the Long Beach Community College District. And sir, I think it's fair to say these are very difficult times for California's community colleges. You joined the board in 2002. Those were good times. In the last 3-4 years, state funding has dropped 13%. I mean, this is tough.
It is. But you know, it's a challenge for us with the community college system in general, and Long Beach City College, which is one of 112 community colleges in California. So we're not alone. All the other colleges are having the same impact. One of the most unusual things about higher education in California is with the UC system and the Cal State system, they have the ability to, for lack of a better word, raise revenue. Fees.
You don't.
We don't. We're tied entirely, 100% tied into the state legislature. And even when the legislature raises the fees for our students, we are not guaranteed to get that money. And in the past, we haven't. So
here's an interesting challenge. I recently learned that the community colleges of California last academic year had the steepest spike in the nation. But California community colleges still have the lowest fees in the nation. So it's kind of the worst of both worlds. You're spiking, but yet you become a target because you're 50th out of 50.
Right, and it's interesting and true because other community colleges in other states are run also very differently. And so it really comes down to, though, no matter how we work through all of this, it's still as students want to improve themselves through education. The worst thing for us right now is during bad economic times is historically when we have more students come to the community colleges in California.
They want to come back, retrain.
Exactly. And then you add to that the fact that the UC system and the Cal State system are limiting the number of students they're allowing into their campus systems. Well, that even puts more of a burden, and yet at that same perfect storm time, the legislature has reduced our funding.
I want to ask you about funding. As you know, Governor Brown has an initiative that will be on the ballot in November. And that initiative would increase sales tax by 1/4 cent for 4 years, increase income taxes on the wealthy for 7 years. As part of balancing the budget in June, there were essentially no cuts to education, banking on the passage of the November tax initiative. Talk to me about your sense of that initiative, that proposition.
Well, there's two sitting out there. There's
Yes.
a competing one that is also interesting to look at. And again, even if these pass, one or both, all that does is keep our head above water. It doesn't help us in the future at all.
But have you taken a position on the initiative?
No, we haven't. And interesting you should say that. I was talking to one of my trustee colleagues.
Right. And
he was talking to me about how he favored the other one.
Well, the other initiative is, it's been sponsored by Molly Munger, a wealthy individual. It's a very different initiative. It changes the formula for income taxes. I think the rates would increase 0.4% to 2.2%. Some could say that is more fair, it share the burden. Virtually all the funding would go to education.
And the education, though, which was, I find it ironic because he is not what I would view as the most conservative individual in the world, and yet here he's telling me he's favoring that one. And I mentioned the fact, well, that is really to go to K-12.
Right.
And his point, well, that's part of Prop 98, which means we will get a percentage of it. All this said and done, I am very concerned about the November ballot because I don't know if the voters have a clear understanding of what it is. I think that the state legislature hasn't taken steps to assure voters.
Well, and there are competing interests flying back and forth,
right.
And also competing trends. I mean, Californians generally have been generous with bond initiatives when they're on the local level. I think in 2010, 40 out of 53 passed. But we have not passed a statewide tax initiative since 2004. In June, we voted down a cigarette tax.
Right.
Hello, it's California. We voted down a cigarette tax.
That's amazing, isn't it?
And are we ready?
That's what worries me. And so how we strategize on the local level, Long Beach City College, and I think a lot of other colleges do the same thing, we're taking the approach of budgeting with the intent of that not passing.
Right.
Because we can't plan on it. And even if it passes, we still have questions of what that funding really is going to be. So it's been very difficult.
Your friends at the Cal State system have really gone the extra mile in terms of preparing for the worst in their eyes. The Cal State system has said we are waitlisting everyone who applies this fall until we know what happens with this initiative. That really wreaks havoc on the future, on the lives of 12th graders.
Well, think of any student. Think about when we were back in college.
Right.
I can't remember that far anymore. But It really is difficult for when we're doing, what you mentioned about with the Cal State system and so on. One thing about the community college system in general, and again, Long Beach in particular, all of our different constituencies there, full-time faculty, part-time faculty, classified staff, administrators, we have all taken financial cuts in benefits and salary. We really, to commend at Long Beach City College, all of these individuals have stepped up and tried to make the very best of the situation for the students.
But that being said, I mean, in this upcoming fiscal year, I should say, there's a plan by LBCC to eliminate 43 positions, reduce assignments on 96 positions, cut management by 12 positions. I mean, one could argue we are getting to a point where we can't educate the students that want to be educated.
Well, what we try to do, and the number actually, we had 55 layoffs of classified staff.
In the past.
In the past.
And in the future.
We're planning on even more. And the whole goal is, worst case scenario, to protect the classrooms as much as possible. But it becomes impossible when it's just the numbers don't work. And you reach that point. And unfortunately, we don't know where we are on that in regards to, is this the end? Are we going to be hit even worse come November? Or even if it passes? There's so many questions.
So why haven't you taken a position on the tax initiative?
Because a lot of times we wait to see how it flushes out, because if you get too far in front of it, it changes on you. So we take a very conservative approach as far as getting in front of, especially things coming out of ballot initiatives. I would just tell you personally, I traditionally have difficulty with ballot measures because, now again, there's a reason why they're doing this one, because there's financial reasons and the voters have to take a stand, and the governor has said, I will only do it if the voters give me that direction. But I have to tell you, I get very frustrated with Sacramento, and I know a lot of people.
Well, you're not alone.
That's why I don't try to make it a habit. But here I sit, doing everything we can and representing a college where all the constituencies are doing the same thing.
But I guess, I mean, your voice counts. You're on the board of trustees, and if you speak to your neighbors about the importance of the passage of the initiative, I mean, I'm not taking a position. I'm just saying that holds sway. And so I guess what I'm trying to figure out, I mean, you're not alone. I'm not trying to single you up, but I mean, arguably this is very important. If this doesn't pass, Long Beach City College, one of the finest community colleges in the entire system, is going to hurt.
Oh, absolutely. And so the answer to your question, we historically take positions, but we take it at an appropriate time when all the information has come in.
And why is it that you take it as a group? It's interesting. That's not uncommon.
No, that's not uncommon,
right.
Because when you're and it also, I have to tell you, is a little bit different than when I was on the Long Beach City Council for 12 years.
Right.
But you do take a little bit more of approach of as a group.
Right.
And individuals can take a position.
Of course.
I'll use another example. There was actually a ballot measure that they were trying to push forward for signatures, and it was on an oil tax. And some people came to us at the college and said, "Well, you take a position now," and we said, "You don't even have signatures yet."
No, that's a little early.
So that's way early. That's like saying you're suddenly married and have kids and you haven't even met the person.
Right,
yet. So, but it really has been so. It has been a process for us. I can't imagine where we wouldn't take a position at the appropriate time. But we always look at things on how we're planning, and this is part of it. But I would just tell you for sure, we're not taking the approach of, well, we hope and pray it passes and we'll plan accordingly. We're planning that worst case scenario, unfortunately, and that's where we have to be. As
you walk around Long Beach City College, of which you are an alum, what's the mood?
Well, it depends who you talk to and when you talk to them. If you're talking to a student, they're trying to get classes and they can't get their classes and they're trying to move on with their careers, they're probably very frustrated. Faculty members, when you're in the middle of labor negotiations, you're trying to get concessions on salary. That's hard. And but I have to tell you that you brought up about the bond measures and local bond measures.
Right.
It's amazing to me how much people love Long Beach City College and they're willing to support a bond measure. Now, we have a responsibility as a governing board when we are given those dollars to make sure those dollars are used appropriately. Now, the reason that sounds very simple, but then you look at the Los Angeles Community College District and you realize it's not simple.
Oh, they've had their problems.
You can blow money in the worst ways.
Jeff Kellogg, thanks for joining us. His name is Jeff Kellogg. He's a member of the Long Beach Community College District. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you for joining us on Charter California Edition.